By Christmas, I'll be sipping champagne in Tuscany with your money. He said it like it was already booked. Armani suit, private jet, the whole stupid fantasy. Then he laughed and poured more of that glowing tonic into a branded vial. I was standing at the lab bench, hands still smelling of ethanol, watching the CEO of Vitanova hold up the product he called a miracle cure, like a holy relic. He'd built a marketing machine around promises. Miraculous recoveries, miracle case studies, celebrity endorsements, and none of it would have mattered if I hadn't been the one who knew what was actually in that bottle. Have you ever watched someone lie with that kind of calm, like they were telling you the weather? What would you do if that lie was making the sick pay their last savings? We started as a small biotech in Seattle with a decent prototype and big dreams. 2 years of lies, glowing Instagram testimonials, and a viral TEDx-like keynote later, they had raised tens of millions in Series B funding and had thousands of customers, many of them elderly, many of them desperate. People believed because they wanted to believe. Investors believed because they wanted returns. For me, it was supposed to be science. "You're too stupid to even see what's coming," he told me in private the night we left the lab for the last time. "We don't need you to mix the story. We need you to keep your mouth shut." I had no idea what I was about to discover. Part 1. The Deception. The first public revelation was a PR video with him standing by a Tesla, his grin wide, the product held like a trophy. "This is not a remedy," he said on the stage. "This is a revolution." The crowd went wild. Clips went viral. Donations poured in via Stripe and GoFundMe-like pages for research and accelerated access to the cure. Back at the lab, my title was head chemist. I knew formulation. I knew stability. I knew how to control for placebo and identify active ingredients. What they sold as concentrated botanical nanoparticles was something I'd spent months trying to stabilize. I did my job. I designed a formula that could, in theory, be honed into something useful. But the solution on the manufacturing line diverged from my notes. It was sweeter, lighter. They'd added something to improve taste and mask impurities. They told me it was harmless. "It makes it more palatable for older folks." The production manager shrugged. "No big deal." But the change went beyond palatable. I found a batch of rejected material in a waste drum one night. Mislabeled bottles, seals cut, documentation incomplete. My Ring doorbell recorded a delivery I hadn't authorized. I checked employee logs and my company email. Dozens of directives to expedite shipments and reclassify QC hold. When I asked about it, he smiled that shark smile and said, "Quality is a marketing problem, not a science one." But I had no idea what I was about to discover. What you need to understand, a lot of people put a lot of faith in what that company sold. There were testimonials from people who swore they felt better. There were Facebook support groups with 20,000 members. There were even elderly donors who liquidated retirement accounts because he promised improvement within weeks. The company took payments, millions, and promised to scale production. They had an almost religious social media cult around them. I started poking around in my spare hours. At first it was curiosity. Then it became suspicion. Then it became anger. I pulled raw samples. I ran them through our instruments. The spectroscopy data looked off. The active markers we had spent months engineering were either absent or at trace levels that could not explain the claims. I confronted him. "You're playing with people's lives," I said. "You told investors and patients there's a biologically active compound in here." He shrugged. "The market doesn't want facts. It wants hope. We're giving them hope." "Hope backed by nothing is a scam," I said. "You can't just sell placebo and call it a cure." He smiled and walked me to the door. "You're too sentimental for this, Mark. We have investors. We have press. You can either be part of the future or you can be a problem. Problems get shown the door." They did. A perfunctory HR meeting, a non-disclosure, a small severance. My access was cut, my name removed from the company site. They painted it as a mutual parting of ways. On their next investor call, he called me a disgruntled employee. I was furious. I was ashamed. I had once believed in the product. I felt complicit. I had to choose: keep quiet and let people pay with their lives and savings, or risk everything to expose what I knew. Have you ever been the only person who knew something was wrong? Have you ever wanted to be the one who stands up? I started quietly. I took a clean sample of the product home. I copied manufacturing logs. I downloaded 47 deleted messages from my company phone using a data recovery utility because I wasn't about to rely on their backups. The messages were damning. He'll never figure it out. He's completely clueless. Ship the pink batch. The reviews look better. Make sure QC signs off. You have the screenshots, right? A friend asked when I told him. Don't go alone. I have the screenshots if you don't believe me, I said. But then, what happens if I was wrong? What happens if the lab screwed up? What happens if people get angry at me for wrecking something that could become legit? Doubt haunted me. I slept a few hours in a recliner with the vial in my pocket like a grenade. Then the news did something for me I couldn't have engineered. A local investigative reporter in Seattle reached out to me via a pseudonymous DM after a tip. She'd had several families reach out, elderly folks who had sent thousands, some of them with worsening conditions. She wanted to know, were the active ingredients there? Was this a legitimate therapeutic or bottled hope? We arranged an anonymous meetup in a coffee shop near Pike Place. I slid her a thumb drive. Test it, I said. If I'm wrong, hell, I'll walk away. But if I'm right, you'll have their lives. She tested the sample at an independent lab, a real one, certified and public. The results were simple and savage. Nothing of the advertised active molecule detectable beyond trace contamination. The declared active concentration in our marketing documents was off by several orders of magnitude. The product was mostly sugar water with flavoring and a tiny, almost symbolic amount of botanical extract. It felt like a punch to the gut. The company had used the veneer of science to sell superstition. People had sent life savings to a bottle of sugar water housed in fancy glass. What happened next changed everything. Part 2. The Discovery. When the independent lab results came back, I felt simultaneously vindicated and terrified. The reporter ran a careful piece on the science, not the drama. She quoted me anonymously, footnoted everything, included lab certificates. The first article went up and began to ripple. Within 48 hours, the FDA, yes, the FDA, contacted her newsroom. They started a preliminary inquiry. I assumed our tip would be a whisper, but the agency has teeth when public health is involved. They sent subpoenas. They asked for chain of custody documentation. They searched manufacturing records. They requested samples. I reached out to the investigator handling the case, a pragmatic woman named Elena at the FDA, who smelled of late nights and coffee. We don't take crousades, she told me on the phone. We take evidence. Can you give me sample chain of custody? Can you prove the sample came from production, not just a bottle you bought on Etsy? I had to be methodical. This wasn't about me taking revenge. It was about institutional accountability. But I also wanted the person who had lied to friends and donors to feel something close to the humiliation he had caused others. I can show you a shipment manifest, I said. I can show you the deleted messages. I can show you his transfers to a Nevada trust. I can show you the ring footage of him in the bottling hall at 2 a.m. Those are bold claims, Elena said. You sure you want to be that involved? If you have any idea what those testimonials are worth to their families, I said, I want them to be able to know what was real. She asked me if I was prepared to testify. I said I was, but I was lying. I wasn't prepared for the public spectacle or the legal jousting that would follow. I had to prepare fast. You won't believe what I found next. In the weeks that followed, a pattern emerged. The money trail was real. Payments from customers were processed through a maze of payment processors and routed to shell companies. He'd been living large, a $12 million house in Bellevue, a beachfront property in Malibu, a trust that controlled assets amounting to an $847 million estate in family holdings, or, At least that's what his PR claimed. Investments in Art, a chain of boutique pharmacies that sold exclusive access, all of it created to mask the origin of the revenue. I downloaded bank statements through a mutual friend who worked in accounting. Not illegal, but morally gray, and found transfers to an offshore consultancy that was a dead drop. I found invoices for research partnerships. That led to a shadow lab in Tacoma, where nothing resembling authentic manufacturing took place. It was a scam not just in product, but in business structure. Create aura, extract cash, launder via prestige purchases, reinvest in image. And then there were the 47 deleted messages. The data recovery utility had recovered a string of texts he sent to a marketing executive. One read, "Make it emotional, not factual. Emotion sells." Another read, "Remove any mention of the compound's true concentration. Detail can be adjusted during release." I printed them out and put them in a folder labeled Truth. Throughout this stage, I felt like I was building a castle out of receipts. There were moments I thought they'd bury me. He had lawyers. He had a PR firm. He had investors ready to defend the brand. He also had an army of customers who were angry at anyone who dared say the bottle didn't help. The comment sections turned toxic overnight. People called me a liar. Have you ever been attacked for trying to help strangers? Have you ever Googled your own name and watched smear articles pile up? Then the FDA made its move. They executed a search warrant at the warehouse. They seized product samples from multiple facilities, including the shadow lab. They tested, and the results were brutal. The so-called active ingredients weren't present in any meaningful concentration. Instead, the samples contained sucrose and water, flavoring agents, and preservatives. No viable therapeutic agents. The agency issued a recall notice. The headline read, "FDA investigates. Miracle cure may be sugar water." The public fallout was immediate. Stock plummeted. Donors demanded refunds. Class action lawyers circled like sharks. He posted a video on Instagram. "We will cooperate," he said, and then his tone changed when the narrative flipped. "We were wrong," he said that night in a live stream, "and we're making it right." But the stream had already been monetized, and his PR team was editing messages. None of it felt sincere. Part 3. The preparation. I wasn't content to let the FDA's procedural machinery be the only instrument of justice. That was bureaucratic and slow, and frankly, wouldn't humiliate him enough. I wanted the company dismantled in the light of day. I wanted his lies to be visible on record. I wanted him to stand in a courtroom and answer questions in front of families he'd deceived. So I hired a lawyer, Margaret Chen, who had a reputation for taking on big pharma and winning. I remember when I first walked into her office on 4th Avenue and told her, "I need to bring down a company." She didn't smile. "Show me everything," she said, "and be prepared for 3 things. This will get messy. This will cost money. And you will probably regret your first impulse to go public." I gave her the folder, lab results, the 47 deleted messages printouts, the ring footage, bank transfers, invoices, and the list of customers who had been misled. She nodded slowly. "This is the most sophisticated asset protection I've seen in 30 years, she said. "But it isn't invulnerable. If we can tie the messaging to intentional claims and then tie his personal enrichment to deceptive practices, we can bring a civil fraud suit and support the FDA's criminal compulsion." "Will it hold up?" I asked. "We'll make it hold up," she said. "But every great plan looks fragile until it isn't." We executed a series of chess moves. Margaret filed an emergency motion to freeze certain assets. The properties and bank accounts tied to the shell companies. The judge granted it provisionally. We subpoenaed the shadow lab. We forced the PR firm to produce emails. We called for depositions. And like any good drama, there were moments it looked like everything would fall apart. Moment 1. The defense filed for a gag order. They claimed I had breached non-disclosure by releasing proprietary information. The judge nearly issued it. If that gag order had held, my voice would have been silenced. Moment 2. A key witness, The production manager, who had originally shrugged about palatable changes, recanted publicly. He gave a statement that made him look like a scapegoat. For 2 days, our case trembled. Moment 3. Someone leaked a private text of mine, implying I'd tampered with evidence. Social media turned on me again. Fundraising slowed. Each time, Margaret had a counter. She deposed witnesses, forced the production manager to explain inconsistencies under oath, produced metadata showing the timing of records matched the product batches. She introduced chain of custody logs the FDA had compiled. When the defense tried to say the samples were contaminated, our independent lab replicated the test under court-supervised conditions. The more we turned over stones, the more roaches scuttled. Investors who had previously defended him wrote to their boards expressing regret. One major investor, a private equity firm in New York, quietly withdrew support and provided documents showing the founder had hidden certain revenue streams from due diligence. The scale of the deception became impossible to deny. Have you ever planned something that sometimes felt like a fantasy? What would you have done differently if you were me? I worked with Elena at the FDA, who began sharing records once she trusted me. We prepared for the day when the CEO would be under oath. We practiced cross-examination lines. He was arrogant in deposition. He smiled, deflected, and repeated corporate scripts. "We believe in our mission," he said like a prayer. "Any discrepancies are anomalies." "Then explain the procurement receipts for sucrose," Margaret asked calmly. "Explain the supplier invoices showing bulk sugar orders flagged as flavor stabilizer. Explain the research partnership with a shell that lists consultancy but has no physical address." He stammered. He offered PR platitudes. And then there was one moment, a stupid human mistake on his part. "Why did you instruct marketing to remove any mention of concentration?" Margaret asked. He looked up. "We wanted to avoid overpromising. You told them to delete data that would show the active levels are orders of magnitude lower than advertised," she said. He blinked. "I didn't." We had him on record. He was sweating. His lawyers whispered. The courtroom footage, grainy but damning, was already being fed to newsrooms. Part 4. The Confrontation. The courtroom felt smaller than it should have. Cameras were allowed because the judge said public interest overrode the defendant's preference. Families lined the gallery. Some held faded pictures of loved ones who had hoped too hard. The defendant walked in with that old grin, but it no longer reached his eyes. The judge opened the folder, and her expression changed from professional neutrality to something like surprise. Margaret started the cross-examination with surgical calm. "Mr. Callahan," she said, using his last name, "you described your product in press releases as containing concentrated botanicals with nanoparticle delivery. Is that correct?" "Yes," he said. "Did you ever publish in a peer-reviewed journal the data supporting that claim?" "No." "Did you ever have a randomized, placebo-controlled trial with the required endpoints you marketed to customers?" "No." "Then on what basis did you make therapeutic claims?" He tried to pivot to testimonials. "Because people reported benefits." Knowing that testimonials can arise from placebo effects and expectation bias, did you ever disclose that to donors? She asked. "No," he admitted. His voice had an edge for the first time. "We didn't." "Why did you instruct your team to remove concentration data in marketing materials?" Margaret asked, sliding in the email. He looked at the screen where his own email appeared. The courtroom murmured when he squinted. The defense lawyer objected, but the judge overruled. He had sent the email, redact concentration, emphasis on outcomes, not science. The CEO's face went red. The family members in the gallery shifted. He had built a kingdom on the absence of facts and the presence of feeling. Then, Margaret played the Ring doorbell footage. It was a blocky nighttime clip of him in the bottling hall. He was alone. He opened a case labeled flavoring and dumped something into a basin. He shook the bottle, sealed it, photographed it. The defense argued the footage was out of context, But a jury doesn't need finesse to see someone adding something to a product in the dark of night. You told a donor on livestream that this is evidence-based, Margaret said as the footage looped. Yet your emails instruct no concentration. Which is it? He started to cry then, not with real remorse, but with the panic of a man realizing his stage had collapsed. I wanted to help people, he said. We thought it would get there. 2 years of lies doesn't become trying the day it's exposed, Margaret said. It becomes fraud. There were gavel bangs, objections, and in the end, the jury didn't need to be told how the money flowed. The bank records, the offshore consultancy, the luxe purchases, the curated testimonials. Everything painted one simple picture. He had knowingly marketed a product with false claims, accepted payments under false pretenses, and enriched himself while hiding the truth. When the verdict came, it was more than a single word. It was a release valve. The judge read a list of charges: fraud, misbranding a drug under the Food and Cosmetic Act, wire fraud. He was found guilty on multiple counts. There were tears in the gallery. Some cried with vindication. Some cried from the realization that relief isn't always chemical. Sometimes it's just the truth landing loud. She was sentenced to prison? No, he was sentenced. The man who promised champagne in Tuscany was ordered to forfeit assets. The freeze we won in pre-trial became permanent as the judge ordered disgorgement of profits and restitution. His $12 million house, the offshore trusts, linked to that $847 million estate PR blurb, boutique pharmacies, and bank accounts were ordered to be liquidated to repay victims where possible. The brand was dead. I remember the line Margaret said after the sentencing that made the room exhale. Justice doesn't fix everything, but it does stop the same hand from doing the same harm again. He was led from the courtroom. He turned his head like a beaten animal. It was a small, satisfying thing to see his arrogance replaced by a kind of hollow humiliation. The families in the gallery stepped forward to speak. One elderly woman hugged me and said, "You saved us from empty hope." Some viewers on social media called me a hero. Others said I was a rat. Some thought our approach was too public. Was I right to throw him into the light? Tell me I'm not crazy for what I did next. Part 5, The Aftermath. 6 months later, the recall was permanent. The FDA issued additional guidance for companies making therapeutic claims absent clinical trials. Several investors sued for misrepresentation and recovered some losses. The SEC filed ancillary charges related to investor fraud. The defendant was sentenced to several years and ordered to pay multi-million-dollar restitution. The assets were used to establish a victims fund. It wasn't perfect. Money couldn't restore health, but it prevented future predatory sales. My life changed. I had lost friends who'd chosen loyalty over truth. I had sleepless nights and a few months where I couldn't get a bank loan without explaining my involvement. But I also felt less complicit. Margaret and I kept in touch. She sent me a text after the final orders. "You did good." I started consulting for a nonprofit that helps verify health products. It felt like a purposeful second act. I know some people think I went too far. Some argue whistleblowers should go through internal channels only. But internal channels were what he had gamed. Some people say the